French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy is here. His latest book is called The Genius of Judaism. In it, he examines the resurgence of anti-Semitism and reflects on the Jewish state of Israel. He also explores what it means to be a chosen people and the foundations of Jewish thought. In an editorial for the New York Times ahead of Friday's inauguration, he cautioned Americans to be wary, Jewish Americans to be wary of President Trump. I am pleased to have Bernard-Henri Lévy back at this table. We have known each other for a long time and have been doing conversations at this table and in tables in Paris for more than 20 years. So welcome back.
Thank you.
President Trump. First, as someone who's been engaged in sort of the politics of your own home state of France, you have seen the rise of populism in Europe. Clearly, that was a populist inaugural address. Your response to what you have heard so far in the presidency of Donald Trump?
It's not a response, it is a stupor. I was astonished. A president address with fist raised. President address where he insulted the whole establishment of Washington. In a way, the American people and even the world was so astonishing. The day after, when he was in Langley, in the back, his back, giving the back to the wall of the names of those officers of the CIA who died for the fatherland. He spoke only of himself. He spoke only of the bigness of the size of the crowd which was on Washington D.C. in such a childish way. I said that with all the respect I owe to this country and the American people, but to be in front of the CIA with the wall of the dead and to speak of the size of the crowd for his own pride, this was so strange.
He did go on to say how much the reports that he didn't trust the CIA and that he criticized them for some of the decisions they've made, but they've been criticizing themselves for decisions they have made, the CIA said. But they're in front of that wall. And secondly, he did say, that he would be their strongest defender and all of that. But it got lost in these other remarks about crowd size and everything else.
And he got lost also in his comment about the press. He is the commander-in-chief, but he is also the guarant of the American democracy now. And the freedom of press, the respect of the opinion of the others is a pillar of any democracy, and in particular the best democracy in the world, which is American democracy. I'm surprised to see a president saying, I am at war with the press. This is very strange. I'm surprised to see that when people demonstrate in the street, his first reaction was to say, I thought that there was a vote a few days ago. No, to demonstrate is all right, especially when the popular vote was in favor of his rival, of Hillary Clinton, as everybody knows.
She got more votes than he did.
So this is frankly so bizarre, so strange. And when you see the comparison with Barack Obama was so decent. He was so wise. He did show such a coolness in the way of transmitting the flame of the state.
But as you say that, my friend, you would have liked to have seen Barack Obama and the U.S. government do more in areas where you will have enormous concern about human rights.
There is a lot of things.
You would like to have seen American leadership exercised more.
I would have liked to see the American leadership exercising itself in Syria, preventing the carnage, the real carnage in Aleppo.
Right.
Aleppo, the real carnage was there.
Yeah,
I would have liked.
But that was a same Barack Obama who you've been a couple of seconds ago praising.
Yes.
And I'm only pointing that out because of all the things you have said and written about, the horror of Aleppo and people who history will judge harshly.
I praise him for his decency and for his behavior. After that, politics, in democracy, no politics is perfect. I would not praise Barack Obama for the 2334 resolution on the UN about Israel and the Palestinian state. This was not a good resolution. It was a bad place to do that, a bad timing and a bad wording. So it's not a question of defending. We are not in a story between Democrats and Republicans. It is not an affair of being right or left. It is an affair of being fit for office or not. Obama made mistakes, but he was fit. Trump, I hope he is fit. The world hopes he is fit. The whole world is waiting and hoping for Trump revising his attitude and acting in a proper way.
You have, and they're all different, but you have populism in France in the presence of Le Pen.
Yes.
Could she be president of France?
I could not imagine Trump being president of America, so I will not make any prediction about Marine Le Pen. If Trump is elected in America, everything is possible everywhere. We are in a time where, for various reasons, because in particular because of the new mass media, because
of the loss of jobs, because of
and because of the loss of truth,
and because of the fear of the fear of
not the loss of job. The Barack Obama era did not do so bad in terms of job. No, the loss of
indeed, the unemployment rate went from 8 point plus to 9 down to 4. But there are a lot of people in America because factories have moved out.
Of course.
You know, it dramatically has upset their own economic security.
In terms of job, it was not a carnage. The Obamacare was not a carnage.
That's language you thought was terribly inappropriate.
Yes, it was inappropriate. And what is, for me, one of the reasons of this rise of populism is the lack of truth. The idea that the truth does not exist any longer. This post-truth era,
or alternative
in which
facts, as
alternative
they say.
facts, yes, alternative facts. Even in this affair of the size of the crowd, it was. It had no sense to see this discussion with photos and so on.
One last question about Trump, because you wrote in an op-ed in the New York Times, we cannot rule out the possibility that Trump's series of ostentatiously promising signals directed at Israel may have sinister effects in the long or even short term. It may send the wrong signal to those who would be only too happy to see the United States set the example of making unilateral, unnegotiated decisions, thereby opening the way to other shows of force.
Yes, I do. This is one of the reasons why I was opposed to the resolution of the UN on December 23, because I believe that all these issues about Palestine and Israel has to be discussed in a bilateral way. I think that the two parties should know that there cannot be a coup de force. It has to be discussed in a bilateral way. It is true on one side, it is true on the other one. And I fear, yes, Mr. Trump, apparently the new administration Mr. Trump has discovered a sudden love for Israel, a new love, for maybe some personal reasons.
He's been on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu in the last 24 hours.
I know, but I hope he will not use the case of Israel to show his determination, for example. I hope he will not use the case of Israel to show that he's strong. These matters regarding Israel are so burning issues, so dramatic. They are questions of death and life. They cannot be discussed and decided like this.
Do you believe that a two-state solution is slipping away?
I think it is still alive. The two-state solution is still alive, and I think it is the only solution. It is this or the hell. Two-state solution or hell. I think that for the Palestinians, of course, but also for the security of Israel, for the identity of Israel, if Israel has to remain Israel, it has to be with the two-state solution. If not, we will have a binational state with Jews being a minority in the Israel of the future. This is not
But having
why,
all the power.
Huh?
But having all the power.
Okay,
Being a minority, but having the power.
But Israel was not based on a dream of power. Israel was based on a dream to build a special state, not to build a strong state only. Strength is necessary when you are surrounded by enemies, but this is not the core of the dream and of the genius of Israel.
I want to talk about this book in the time remaining, but first, is anti-Semitism, in your judgment, because you speak around the world, on the rise?
It is on the rise,
and
yes.
And why is that?
It is on the rise because it took a new shape and it took a new narrative. The new narrative of anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. In one word, the only way to be efficiently anti-Semite today is to be anti-Zionist, is to disguise the hate of the Jews under the umbrella of the hate of Israel. This feeling of the hate of Israel is growing all over the world, including in America.
So they call it a hate against a state, and in fact it's a hate against Jews.
Yes, of course it is. If it was the hate of a state, or if it was the compassion to the victims, to the Palestinian victims, you would see the same people, the same compassionate people expressing their compassion for the victims in Syria, for the victims of the genocide in Darfur, for the victims of so many places in the world. So no, there is a sort of dedication of hate against Israel, a stigmatization of Israel, which has no other explanation than the redressing of the old hate against the Jews. This is the new form of anti-Semitism, and the world has not yet found all the replies, all the appropriate replies against this new hate. This is one of the reasons why I wrote this book. This book is what? It is partly an effort to give ammunitions, to give weapons and ammunitions, moral ammunition to those who want to fight this new trend, this new black wave of the new anti-Semitism.
So this is, you're handing them verbal, passionate moral arguments against anti-Semitism.
Against anti-Semitism, and also what does anti-Zionism does? It delegitimizes Israel on the ground of liberal values. I am a liberal, and I believe that as liberals, we should not condemn but praise Israel. On the very ground of the liberal values, Israel has, by many aspects, lessons to give to a lot of liberals in the world in terms of democracy, in terms of multi-ethnicity, in terms of the way of dealing with minorities, in terms of how to fight terrorism, how to behave in a state of war or emergency. On all these topics, Israel behaves well in terms of liberal standards.
But so here's my point. That's about the state of Israel. But this book is called The Genius of Judaism, not The Genius of Israel.
Absolutely.
This is about your faith.
Absolutely. Israel is the first part of the book, and the second part of the book
is about your faith.
Is devoted to my faith, yes, to my creed. It is the faith of a non-believer, because one of the things which I try to explain is that you can be a Jew without believing.
Without believing
in God, or without believing in the sky. I think that one of the aspects of the teaching of the greatest master of Judaism is that what is required from a Jew is less to believe than to study. It is less to mix oneself in the sort of mystic communion than to go on and on in a text or in the knowledge to understand better the world. So for me, the genius of Judaism is that, intelligence, study, and the sense of the other.
Is this something that has been part of your core as long as you have been alive? Or is this something you came to, because I know other friends of mine who came to a greater love and appreciation of their Judaism later in life?
This book, I'm working on it since years and even decades. I'm writing it in a sort of secret since maybe 20 years.
You mean taking notes and filing them away, or just simply
studying? For example, in the center of this book, there is a commentary of the book of Jonah. Jonah is a prophet who is ordered by the world to go to Nineveh, which is the worst city in the world, which is the capital of evil. What does it mean for a prophet, for an average Jew, to go to the very capital of sin? What does it mean? It took me years and years to go into the verse to understand what it meant and why it is so important to go and preach, to go and speak to someone who is completely hostile to you. This is also the core of what I call the genius of the Judaism.
To go to Nineveh.
To go to Nineveh, yes. So Nineveh is Nineveh. By the way, it is Mosul today, because Nineveh is the very place of Mosul, but it may mean also Libya a few years ago. It may mean a lot of things. When I went, for example, to Libya, when I went in Bangladesh 40 years ago, I had the feeling to follow the trace of those Jews who believe that to be a Jew did not mean to join in, to get inside a closed and gated community. Judaism is not a gated community. It is an open message. It is a way to be involved in the accomplishment, in the reparation, tikkun olam of the world. Judaism does not address to Jews only. It addresses also to the others. There is one quote which comes on and on in the Jewish text, which is that the Jewish verse has to be read as it had 70 faces. Beautiful quote, 70 faces for the verse. It means what? 70 faces means 70 is the number of the nations on earth. So every Jew, since Maimonides and Rashi to today, believes that to be a Jew is to read the text of the verse as if it was addressed to all the nations of the world and not only to a gated community. This is what I mean by the genius of Judaism.
When you say Jews are the chosen people,
when I say that they're the chosen people, I think it is, I don't say, they say.
I know.
The world misunderstanding say that. What I demonstrate is, number one, they were not chosen at all. The law, the Torah, was given first to all the other people of the world. And it is because they refused, because they declined, that in despair, God is supposed to have given it to these 12 little tribes at the foot of the Sinai. Number two, what the Jewish texts say is that to receive this law is not a chance, is not a privilege, it is a huge burden. And what the Torah says is that if you think that because you have received the law, you have a sort of natural sacrality or sanctity, it is the biggest mistake you can do. This is the story of a great character of the Bible, Korah, the cousin of Moses, who believes that to be chosen means to be the king of the world. Moses punishes him by opening a huge hole in the earth, a sort of mouth in the earth, which swallows Mr. Korah and his 250 followers. So, chosen people means none of the common things which are said about that. I try to explain also why the Hebrew word to express the chosen people, what we call chosen people, is segula. Segula means secret. It means a treasure, a secret treasure. So what I believe is that the Jews, the little Jews as myself and others, we are a sort of secret treasure which escorts the rest of the humanity silently, secretly, in the work of their own history. This, for me, is to be properly a Jew. This is why I call the genius of Judaism.
In the flyleaf of this book, it says, for more than 4 decades, Bernard-Henri Lévy has been a singular figure on the world stage and one of the great moral voices of our time. He's just back from Mosul, and we'll go back to Mosul, where he's making a film about what has happened to that city. Now, Europe's foremost philosopher and activist confronts his spiritual roots and the religion that has always inspired and shaped him but what he had never fully reckoned with. Now, I'm taking that sense. You had never fully reckoned with. What?
No, because to write this book takes time, and it needs another sort of speed, another sort of regime of the mind and of the soul. So since 20, 30 years, I was in Bosnia, I was in Libya, I wrote a lot of books of which I'm proud, but the basement, the secret foundation was this book with which I had to reckon, but it took some time. It did need to go deep to a tradition which...
Do you feel liberated from a burden that you think you had to carry, that to try to explain the depth of your own love for...
No, not from a burden. I feel joyful.
Or a weight, or you felt this heavy sense of responsibility? You've been thinking about this for 20 years, you said.
I always felt responsible. I always felt all my life that my duty as a man, my duty as a writer and a philosopher was to involve, to commit myself when carnage is going on, when we face dispossessed people, when you have some situation of genocide. I always thought that. I know a little better now, having written this book, why I feel that, with which sort of weapons I can face this situation with efficiency, and this is what these Jewish texts tell me. So I don't feel liberated from a burden. I feel joyful to have...
Well, liberation can be joyful. I mean, it's the liberation that I had this responsibility, and I have now fulfilled it. Responsibility to tell a story that was deep inside of me, and I have now fulfilled that
I did not
responsibility.
Yes, but
no burden, no responsibility, just an act of love.
And not fulfilled. How can one be fulfilled when you are contemporary of the massacre of Aleppo? How can one does not feel shame? Myself, I feel shame not to have been able to express the indignity of what was happening in Aleppo. So, not fulfillment. I did not do enough. I will not have enough of the rest of my life to do all that.
I wasn't arguing completeness. I argued that in some sense that to do this, obviously you felt deeply about, and now you have put it together, and as you said, have given people a weapon to use in the fight against anti-Semitism.
In terms of the fight of anti-Semitism, in terms of self-pride also, for me it is very important that the Jews of today feel proud of their values. I defend what I call an affirmative...
And proud of their faith.
Proud of their faith, proud of their commitment to study, and proud of their values.
And their culture.
And their culture, yes, and their values.
The genius of Judaism, Bernard-Henri Lévy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you for joining us.